Thank you for joining us virtually for Jasmine Baetz Artist Talk. I'm Pam Aliaga, the exhibition manager here at the American Museum of Ceramic Art in Southern California. If you haven't visited us, you should. We're very fun, and we have some lovely exhibitions up. AMOCA champions the art, history, creation, and technology of ceramics through exhibitions, collections, outreach, and our wonderful studio programming. Today's Artist Talk celebrates Jasmine's exhibition, Blood in the Fire, Sugar in the Milk, on view at AMOCA's Igal and Diane Silber's Vault Gallery through April 21st. Just a lovely heads up, this event is being recorded, so if you're big camera shy, feel free to turn off your video and politely stay muted until the end of the talk when we'll have our Q&A. And you get to ask all those lingering questions to Jasmine today. Now, a little brief introduction about Jasmine Baetz is that their pronouns are she, her, and has made things out of clay from a young age, and it remains her primary tool for making a sense of the world. She holds a BA in Religious Studies from the University of Toronto, a diploma in Fine Arts from Langara College in Vancouver, a BFA in 3D Fine Arts from Massachusetts College of Art and Design, and an MFA in ceramics from the University of Colorado Boulder. She was an assistant professor of art at Coker University in Hartsville, South Carolina, and is the Lincoln Visiting Professor in Ceramics at Scripps College and Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California. I always assume everyone's from California, but that's just rude for me. Since 2017, AMOCA has had the pleasure of presenting a vault exhibition created by the curator of the Scripps College Ceramic Annual. The vault show is timed to have this comment align at the same time that the Scripps exhibition happens as well. And Jasmine Baetz is the curator of this year's 79th annual Scripps exhibition, titled The Idea of Feeling Brown at AMOCA. But at AMOCA, Baetz' exhibition is Blood and Fire, Sugar and Milk, and will be on view through April 21st. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine Baetz, who will start their artist talk.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Can you all see my screen? Can you all hear me? Okay, great. So, yeah, hi, everyone. Thanks to AMOCA for having me show. It's been great, and also for hosting this talk. And I'm thankful to all of you for coming and listening to me share about my work this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. Yeah, and I will certainly welcome questions from anyone and everyone, whether I've met you before, and if you want to talk about something that I present on today or something tangential. I'm interested in what you all think. So yeah, I teach at Scripps in Claremont Graduate University right now. I love teaching ceramics. I am trained in ceramics. Sometimes I feel a little bit uneasy as a ceramics person, and yet here I am. So anyway, I teach, through ceramics, I teach theory and practice, and I find any material, but especially ceramics, to be a really good site from which to do work of interrogation, to talk and think about structures, dismantling them, structures of settler colonialism, white supremacy, thinking about how we can practice intersectional critiques of power through our materials and our process and time together in the studio. So I both think about using the material of ceramics as a vehicle for doing that interrogation, and then also looking at the very material of ceramics itself as something that can be sort of critiqued and thought about in terms of a number of things. Happy to speak more to that during the Q&A. So before I get into some of my work for you today, I'm just going to give you some kind of guiding ideas to think about how I make and teach and research, and where a lot of what I do comes from. So my identity as a mixed race person and my lived experiences and experiences especially of belonging and unbelonging in different spaces is a lot of what guides me. I'm really interested in both identifying and dismantling hierarchies and structures and thinking about messing with categories, identities, ideas. Yeah, a lot of dreams about dismantling. I am also committed to, in a lot of my art practice, and I'll speak a little bit about my more collaborative work, working collectively with context and sort of positionality in the forefront. And then in general, in all of my work, I try to attend to history and also historiography. So both history and then also how history is kept and told. So today it's a mostly chronological presentation. I'm gonna talk you through my art practice, I would say in general, and I will conclude with a few extra remarks about the work that is at AMOCA. Has anyone seen one of these before? Have one in their looted art collection? Anyone? Okay. So this is an incantation bowl, and this particular bowl is it was probably made and inscribed on between the 6th and 8th century, and it was found in modern day Iran. And so this bowl and others like it, this one is a Zoroastrian one. I'll talk about Zoroastrians more soon. But these bowls functioned as traps, kind of like devil traps. When they are found in context, they are buried underneath homes, often at the four corners of a dwelling place, and they're buried upside down. So rather than being right side up, something you would eat from, they're upside down. And so this inscription is meant to maybe hold something down or keep something protected. They're sort of protective bowls. And yeah, Pam mentioned that my first degree was in religious studies. So when I was a young person and studying religion at the University of Toronto, I learned about these bowls, and I was really interested in them because for me, I felt a connection to them through my sort of ancestral lines that take me back to this place of modern day Iran before my family and the community they are from moved from that region to India. So I was really interested in like the possibility that I could be related to someone who would have inscribed these bowls. And I was, I was sort of like a clay person from the time I was a young person. So I loved ceramics, but I didn't study it initially in school for reasons I'm happy to talk about later. So for me, it was like finding also the kind of material that I was interested in and a form I was interested in, right? The vessel, the bowl, I was really into wheel throwing at that time. So yeah, I was invested in these bowls. And I could say more, but I'll just keep it moving. So here are some incantation bowls that I made when I was living in Vancouver in British Columbia. And that's when I sort of decided to go back to school. I enrolled in like a fine arts diploma program and did some ceramics there. So my kind of final project at Langara was making these incantation bowls, which, sort of cursed various people a lot. I was really interested in sort of like landlords, as like a good subject for these bowls in my context. But anyway, I went on to bury them with friends and family. and, you know, friends of friends kind of. And it was really, I think, my first sort of performance piece, and, you know, sort of like ascribing an intention to the bowl and then also giving it to others for them to sort of author their own ritual or interaction with based on who they were, their own experiences and connections. Yeah, and I liked this idea of sort of a protective object being activated. And I brought in, here I am wearing like a ritual undershirt over my shirt, very sacrilegious, but I was interested in also like bringing in my own markers of religion and ritual in relation to other people and what they were thinking and doing with them. So after some time, I wound up in Boston and I studied ceramics at Mass Art with Ben and Jana, who I think are both here, which is super special. And I was really into vessels, I think, still when I showed up in Boston. But I started, you know, they break sometimes, and I started taking the pieces and putting them together in different ways. You see that on the left side, kind of using glaze as glue. I loved looking at the work of Linda Sorman, who at least for me, really kind of like developed this vocabulary of accumulation and putting things together in ways that maybe were unconventional or not supposed to be done. And so on the right was sort of my first, I mean, yeah, I think about how I haunted the Mass Art kiln room, but I had a lot of like just giant accumulation pieces. But this one on the right is kind of the first one, and it's like kind of head size. It's very dense. And it's where I worked out a lot of things. I call it foundation myth. And I probably fired that one like 20 times. I'm not sure. And so this is just a shot for you to see in the kiln room. This is by the time I got to Boulder, Colorado, where I went to graduate school for ceramics. And I show you this just to show you my tools of how I kind of took things apart and put them together. I'd have a little grinder, a hammer, and pull stuff out of the kiln and knock it around, add more things, kind of like building block my way to a sculpture. And it was really about the interplay with the kiln. And I wanted to, you know, kind of disidentify, change from forms that were given and reinvent and remake over and over. I also sort of like saw parallels with excavation and sort of dismantling as part of this process, and trying to make new things with things that are given that I might not be super satisfied with. And also during this time, I don't know, especially when I was first starting grad school, I really, you know, was trying to hash out like how could I exist in this world and make ceramic sculpture as my like primary way of interacting and expressing and doing. So I thought maybe if I could like destabilize the viewer a little bit, I could maybe leave them open to change their minds about other things they might feel stable about. I'm not really sure if I fully endorse that, but that's something I thought a lot about at the time. And so I like to kind of like visual precarity to how things were resting or existing in relation to one another. And yeah, the next slide is some images just of different stacks and accumulations as I was sort of thinking through this, and then also in some ways retiring this way of working. Though I think there's important, you know, ways that my installation at AMOCA just like picks up on some of these visual strategies and ways of putting things together. But I want to really briefly, excuse me, speak to you about L'Ossé State Boulder, who are the 6 Chicane student activists who were killed in Boulder, Colorado in May of 1974. So when I went to grad school in Boulder, I very much went because at the time, Boulder had like a ranked ceramics. I think we fell off the rankings, but anyway, great ceramics program. And that's really what drove my decision to go to school there. And I didn't really understand much about the region and history of Colorado, and certainly not of like Chicano history, Chicano student movement history. I was, I would say completely ignorant to all of that and had my own kind of flattened, whitewashed settler education that I got in Canada. And so my idea about the United States was, I would say, similarly flattened and not like regionally informed. And so shortly after shortly after I got to Boulder, I learned about a really disturbing history of racial violence in Boulder, where these 6 students were killed in 2 car bombings 2 days apart. And so also might be helpful for me to define Chicane or Chicanx, Chicana, Chicano is, it's a ethnic racial identity, often identified by people who are Mexican American. It's often a political identification, but like all identity categories, it is slippery and complex how it changes over the years, and also how people relate to it. And as I mentioned before, I am mixed race. I have one parent who is from India, and who is part of this very small religious and ethnic minority of the Zoroastrians. And I guess I'm just saying right now, I'm not Chicana. And it was interesting being in Colorado and the way that my identification paired with the work that I was doing slipped in and out, and particularly white people would identify me as Chicana. So this is just me saying I am not. Though the work that I did in Boulder was very much connected with, done in community, and sort of contingent on histories and activism of the Chicano movement historically and presently. So usually I just do my whole artist talking about Los Seis de Boulder, so I find it difficult to talk about it quickly, but I want to share it with you because this is really what I spend the bulk of my time working on in Boulder, and maybe you can see also how there's ways that this connects with my more like personal studio work that's bound up with my identity. But after learning about Los Seis, I spent my 3 years in Boulder working on a big project with many people, with hundreds of people, to create a memorial to Los Seis de Boulder, because their memory and sort of images of them and presence of them, particularly on the campus at CU Boulder, was completely at least publicly absent. And I wanted to do something, be involved with something, and spearhead something that was going to counter the kind of historical amnesia and the whitewashed way that kind of campus visual culture existed at CU Boulder. So during the Q&A, I'm happy to come back to any of this history or my part in this project. But let me move forward to the next slide so you can see some of the sculptures that I made in community with many other people. And this first one that we made in 2019 is still installed at CU Boulder. It was made permanent thanks to the university libraries and the Black Student Alliance and hundreds of other people who pushed for it to remain on campus. And it has 6 portraits of these 6 students who were killed in 74 and whose legacies of their activism and the tragedies of their deaths were really erased from the campus space. So it was sort of, it's the work that I'm most proud of that I've ever been involved with. And we created additional sort of sculptures, portraits, memorials, and these are some panels that were started, I would say by dozens or hundreds, and then were completed by me and Carlos and a few others in March and April of 2020, when things were at a little bit of a standstill. And we also, this is the last big sculpture that we created that will be installed in downtown Boulder, that was made in collaboration with the city of Boulder. So this community engaged or collectively created public art practice is a big part of what I do and how I think about my work and how I think about kind of the potential of ceramics as a vehicle for sort of collective authorship. So I'm going to go back to my sort of studio, me in the studio work. So this is a piece that I made in Boulder, kind of when I was really, I think, just like heartbroken about the institution. And I called the piece Make It So It Breaks Itself. I was spending a lot of time in the archives and like looking for places where people left cracks or breaks or like maybe things for me to pick up. And I was like thinking about, I don't know, like batons and residue and things, maybe falling, so that something else could happen. And also in grad school, I spent a lot of time, I guess, thinking about like the bounds of ceramics in relation to how I had experienced in life, like my own identity being policed, and sort of like thinking about kind of percentages. And when I say percentages, sometimes when you apply to a ceramics show, like a ceramics juried, whatever, it says like this piece needs to be like 51% ceramics or something like that. Like it will say that. And that always felt, well, now I think it felt a little bit like blood quantum to me. And I didn't like it. So I've always been interested in sort of stretching materially and in other ways what is considered ceramics. So these little units here, you can see there are these little cast objects just in a little found mold. They started with me casting my blood because I was really thinking about it in terms of blood and making these solid objects out of my blood, but they really sort of moved into being a general catch-all for sort of waste materials, especially pieces from other projects and sort of like waste from the studio as other ceramics things happen around them. And the main sort of binding agent in them is just wax. I have waxes, what's holding these together. All right. So I'm gonna briefly, let's see, it's 2:27. Pam, should I go until 2:50?
No, that sounds good.
Okay. Well, then I have time to explain this one. You all see like 4 trays, right? And some other stuff. Okay, I
Yes.
can't see anyone, but hopefully you all do. Great. So let me tell you about this work, because in some ways it goes back to the incantation bowls. And I think is like a little bit of a setup for how some of the themes and things I was thinking about in the fire temple that's at AMOCA. So yeah, this piece is called Surface Finds. And so me and I think 7 other artists, all who are from or have ancestral connections to the Middle East, were invited by Rahale Filsufi to participate in this show, where she's at Vanderbilt, where she took different objects from the collection, the university collection, and had different scholars write a description, a physical description of the piece that was then passed on to each of the artists, and the artists were asked to make work in response to this sort of written interpretation of a ceramic object. And so it's, it's an interesting setup. And for me, well, there's so much going on with it, but for me, a lot of what I thought about was this sense of remove, and this, literal removal from the object, that I was working through with the piece. And so the piece itself was a teapot. So the person who wrote the description for me to work off of wrote about like the body of the pot and the handle and the lid and the spout, like so many parts. That's why I don't teach people how to make teapots. It's too much. But anyway, I sort of sectioned this off and tried to create and recreate the spout, handle, body, and lid over and over, sort of gesturing towards the impossibility of arriving at something like it. And of course, it looks nothing like it. It's, very sort of segmented and spread out. But the title Surface Finds, I used because I was thinking about the incantation bowls. And of course, like on some level, I was really interested in the bowls back when I learned about them, when I was like 18, 19, just for what they were, these like amazing ceramic pieces that to me connected me to someone or something that I felt I was part of. And now my interest in them is partially that, but even more the ways that those bowls are illegally excavated, exported, and moved around the world. And so one of the, so much of what we have in our collections comes to us through such, I guess I would politely say, like dubious means. And one way that the acceleration of those incantation bowls being removed from their context has been by them being labeled surface finds, because if something is found on the surface and not dug for, then you can export it easier in a number of contexts. So I called this piece Surface Finds, and I was thinking, both about the removal that I described before of my own experience of not being able to fully know or fully see so much of what I feel connected to. And then also a commentary upon the sort of removal and currency of objects as part of these, fabulous collections that we hold and teach from and think from. There's so much to talk about in terms of how they got to be where they are. Next, I'm going to talk to you about, Pam mentioned that I am the curator for the 79th Scripps Ceramic Annual. And to the left, I'll just tell you what the images are and then I'll talk about the show. To the left is an installation photo I took of some of my students beginning their work of collectively creating Magdalene Dijkstra's piece, a huge wall piece created through fingerprints of oxides of I don't know if it's yellow ochre. I think it's yellow ochre, red iron oxide, and black iron oxide fills each of those yellow, red, and black spaces. And so, yeah, going back to the sort of maybe expansion of what we think about as ceramics, I'm very invested in sort of assembling a ceramics show that I think like very politely elbows away at maybe what we might think of as conventional or hegemonic ceramics. And then on the right is an image of Fig, who is, I don't know, kind of unprompted, standing with two shoes, one made by me in 2016. It's a little sculpture of my grandmother's Dr. Scholl's slipper, and the other one is made by Christian Vistan, my collaborator, who made their mother's Hoka Clifton last year. And so Christian and I have been making work together, I think, since we were students at Langara College in Vancouver. And I've worked through a lot, thinking a lot about my family, my work, and ideas around the stories that bring us both to where we are through working together and working with materials. So Christian, just like Magdalene, is one of the artists that I invited to be in the exhibition. And through it, we were able to sort of revisit this work, which was about a lot of things, and also about my grandmother and their mother. So I guess this is my pitch to you. The Scripps Ceramic Annual is open until the first week of April. There's some more programming coming up. The exhibition is there in place and you know, waiting for your visit. The gallery hours, I think, are afternoons, probably Wednesdays to Sundays, but I'm very happy with the show and how it all came together, and there's so many amazing artists, and I would love to tell you a little bit about each of their works, but I think that is all for today. So when I found out that the person who curates the Scripps Ceramic Annual has an exhibition at AMOCA's Vault Gallery, I thought about what might make sense in that place, and it's kind of around the size of the kind of like interior chamber of a Zoroastrian fire temple. It just so happens. And so I've been interested in making a fire temple. It's a place of worship for Zoroastrians, and there are lots of them in Western India, where my family is from. And there's some around in North America also. And so when I was in grad school, I went on a trip to India. I went for the first time to India when I was in my late 20s in grad school. And I went on this trip that sort of promised to be a tour of all of the religious sites, and also, you know, it was paid for. So anyways, like a broke grad student, I was very excited that there was this like Zoroastrian trip. I didn't really worry myself about whatever sort of Orthodox propaganda would be running around in the trip alongside me. So I went on it, and it proved to be a challenging trip for me. My when you marry out of the religion, if you are understood as a man, a priest sort of like does something and your whole family is okay, you're pure, you're sanctified. If you marry out of the community and you are understood as a woman, you are sort of like you're done. So my mother was really insistent on me and my brother both having like our ceremonies. And so like I have all my papers because my mom was really kind of a trailblazer with the whole mixed children thing. But I have very few contemporaries and people who have similar experiences. So when I went on this trip, I was in fact not allowed to go in the fire temples that the entire trip revolved around. So I had this sort of continuous experience of you know, and I mean, I like going into spaces of worship. I'm interested on a number of levels, also just because I studied religion, and I kind of take seriously and take an interest in going into spaces of ritual and spaces of religion. But anyway, I was barred entry on this particular trip that completely revolved around these sort of visits. So yeah, sometimes I would just, go get a chai and like make a phone call or something. And sometimes I climbed up to the roof. And so this one time I had a particularly like emotional experience on a roof of a fire temple at Navsari, in Navsari. And I was looking both, because, and I mean, like, trust me, I've been in fire temples. I know how to do it. To sort of counterbalance everything that was going on, I went into the holiest temple on the holiest day on the holiest hour just to, but when I was kind of with the people in the trip, I couldn't go in. So, I was so wanting to have this sort of like experience of like being with the fire, being with the central fire, but my body was understood as one that would defile and destroy it, right? Like send us all to hell. So I was up there sort of on the roof with these depictions of the fire that are appropriate to, have at street level. So I'm showing you all of this so you can make some sense of the fire temple configuration that is up at AMOCA. But there's sort of two kinds of exterior fires, and one was this kind of glass globe, and maybe is like a little bit like Statue of Liberty-ish. And then I think these kind of like concrete, like little combed flames that were both kind of in vessels and just standing alone on a number of the roofs. And I was actually just looking at more fire temple pictures with my mom earlier, and I found some that were like blood red, which was very exciting. So I know I'm not the first one. Let's see. So here is an image of the fire, of kind of like the central sanctified fire that I created when I first staged it last summer. And luckily, everything sort of made it to AMOCA in one piece because it's really just down the road. And my friend M helped me sort of move everything along. And in a second here, you should see the next image. There you go. sort of the process of putting it together. This is the work about to be and being installed at AMOCA. So you can see it's kind of a flower arrangement deal into some sand. But with the density of all of these, and these are ceramic coils, these are long ceramic coils that were made by me and my assistants, Mara and Jasper and and Christian, who all in different ways contributed to this installation. But these long coils were made individually so that they could sort of be drawn with and put together in the installation space. And yeah, so here's sort of my final fire temple at AMOCA. And so you can see these rows of the small flames that are approximating those glass globes or standalone sort of sculptural flames. And you know, it's very red. I'm always curious about how it codes and is understood for other people. I mean, the walls are red, so I'm interested in how that's seen and understood, but it kind of matches for me my sort of effective sphere around the space of the temple and also the space of the roof and what they mean for me. And you know, I think I might you can read my artist statement on the AMOCA website if you want, about how I'm sort of the list of inputs that I'm thinking about with this work. But for the rest of the time we have here, I would love to get any questions about this work or about anything I presented on today.
No. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for that wonderful artist talk. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to either type out your questions in the little chat box or use the raised hand emoji and you can ask it in person. And if you guys do get to visit the exhibition here at AMOCA in person, it's the first time that we've had the vault truly really red. And it's nice because the color vibrates from outside the vault too. So it's been this nice reflection.
I think, does Jen have a question?
I do have a question. Yeah. I was wondering if it was intentional the way the light is working in that room, because something about flames, they give off a reflection, but the ceramic, I guess when you showed the piece, I was like, whoa, there are flames. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the lighting of this piece.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Jen. So I mean, like, to be fair, AMOCA professionally like made the lighting all like fabulous at the end, but my friend Em and I played around with the lighting to see how we could sort of like activate or maybe like flicker, move off of you know, that sort of red background and get things going. Yeah, so it was a little bit of sort of experimentation. We did some cross lighting to help, especially with those the small flames, help their shadows kind of like be a little bit more activated. And we had some like pretty wicked, like really interesting shadows on the central piece initially, like kind of a backdrop onto the ground and ceiling. And we had to just sort of opt for a more simple arrangement in the end. But I loved the potential of the flames going on the ground. And there was also a moment where Pam was like, we need to put, you know, we got to put something behind it so no one walks behind it. We've resolved it in another way, but I love the thinking also about sort of activating that shadow space, which is actually something that, I don't know if Jana's still here, but Jana, I remember teaching me when I was thinking about glazing or surfacing a piece, how I could put it in a place with, you know, sort of high shadow and trace the different shadows as something that would become permanent through glaze. So anyway, it just, yeah, it brought a lot of things together for me. I'm glad it looked fiery for you, Jen.
And then we have a comment from Veronica, which isn't a question, but just to say, good thing you didn't get caught on the roof.
Yeah, I mean, I think they knew I was there. I was pretty disgruntled. So anyway, yeah, I was looking at old pictures. This happened all in 2017, I guess. And I have these pictures of kind of the group down there and everyone just kind of looking at each other, but then like one person looking up at me. So I got a little caught.
Thank you so much for that talk, Jasmine. That was fantastic. Yeah, I've spoken to you a lot about this. I've heard a lot about your work before, but one thing that came out for me for the first time, I think, hearing it all together this way, was like from bowl to this most recent work, from the incantation bowls, this most recent work, was, you know, in the initial, like, what is the incantation bowl? It's this thing to block the evil forces, right? To keep them out. It's a safety thing to prevent the evil forces getting in. And so initially your impulse, like, was to talk about landlords or other evildoers in your own immediate life and so on. And then later on, when you were talking about the surface finds, I started thinking about looters or, you know, colonial forces coming in and doing this evil work or whatever. And maybe your work as a kind of protective bowl somehow. And then by the end, we've got you as the evil forces coming in. And the quote evil forces. And now these temples are saying you can't come in. And so it almost like, are you identifying with the demons here by the end? I don't know. I was just super inspired by that. Just want to throw that at you and see what you had to say.
I don't know. You can write my next artist statement because you've written all of them. But yeah, I mean, well, I have been identified as being the problem, right? Many times in my life. So I don't really know what to say about that right now. So I guess, yeah, just working through that maybe as like a standing dynamic and trying to do the work of differentiating. And it's, you know, as I said at the beginning, I'm interested in muddying categories. So I don't have binary ideas about good and evil, even though that is like classic Zoroastrian, right? To like set it up as a cosmic battleground. So yeah, I think part of the work of my my art and my life is maybe trying to trudge through some of those things that yeah, I mean, obviously calling and pointing to evil where it is, but not having a flattened view of any of these forces.
And then we have a question. Thank you, Joseph, for that question. Selena has a question. I'd love to learn more about your implements of ritual throughout the many forms your work has taken. How did you incorporate ritual and meaning making into the actual process of making this recent fireball?
Yeah, great question. And this, you know, this is also probably a good time. I mentioned my studio assistants who like worked on making so much of this installation with me. And for me, you know, they were doing a lot of the like initial creation, especially of those small forms, building them solid. And then I would do this work of sort of hollowing, finishing, surfacing. And then, oh, I didn't mention all of those small forms are covered in, they're glazed in blood. So they're blood and gum Arabic. So I'm, yeah, always in a literal way, bringing in blood. So there's a number of things. I did want to say just in terms of sort of finishing the pieces and tracing, marks and the forms that were made and the sort of like initial molding. For me, I mean, it was just part of my experience of processing this work, and also thinking about kind of the experiences of others and my own different experiences, and not flattening them or putting them together in a way that is I don't know. Anyway, Selena, I guess, I mean, you know this because we have like made things together. It's just through the doing and like the smoothing and the touching and the moving between hands. Like that's for me part of the ritual, or like that's what it's about for me. And then yeah, so also just in terms of like the material choices, I mean, I love the kind of blood and the fire, sugar and the milk name, because it's kind of a little bit like ick and shocking, and it's very much caught up with kind of like a very canonical Zoroastrian Parsi story of physically being the sugar in the milk, the thing that will sort of sweeten the pot, or anyway, and it's you know, it's a bullshit story, but it's like a core story. So that like material and mixture, yeah, is something that I wanted to allude to, but through using this material of the blood, and conceptually through using the blood. What else do I want to say about ritual? I don't know. Selena, what do you, yeah, I don't know. Thanks for the question. It's a good question.
Everyone's coming in with good questions right now. And then we have Julia Hong who's asking, thank you, Jasmine. I'm so intrigued by the flame in the fire temple. What were some of your considerations regarding the color choices, for example, to keep the color of the flame clay-like as opposed to the color red, etc.?
Yeah. So the color of the central flame, right? When it's not lit very dramatically, it is kind of these series of like rust colors and browns. There's a lot of red, iron oxide in there. And I mean, to some extent, I was just sort of like playing with, like, I'm in a ceramics institution. I am like a ceramics professor. I was in some ways just like performing my identification with ceramics through the visibility of that materiality. Also those like blood flames, the small ones that are covered in blood. I do think they look very like glaze surface. So I was playing with that. The metal bowls that are holding the central flame up, those are smudge pots that were used to warm the citrus groves in Southern California, which I was also thinking about and connecting with agricultural histories in India that relate to my to the Zoroastrian community there, and all these dynamics of sort of power and place in relation to agriculture. So, but they look like you know, a little bit like Paul Soldner American Raku, and I just knew like in a ceramics museum, people would be like, "Is that Raku?" So whatever, I don't know. I was just sort of finding different ways maybe to play around with the idea of the material, and it's a very like, you know, it's fired ceramics. It's about as ceramics as you can get.
Perfect. And then we do have a comment from Ben. Not a question, but, oh, Jasmine, this piece at AMOCA is so yours. The scattered shades of carbon and stacked bowls and the subtle textures of individual coils, so well supported by the clay flames and red walls. Also, so good to see you again and your work from Mexica. Thank you, Ben. Such lovely comments. Everyone's so sweet.
Thanks, Ben. That was good. Just thanks for hyping me up. It's great. You always did.
That's what we're here for. And then we'll take this last question from Mary Dunman. What will you be doing next year, and will you still be a professor at Claremont?
Yeah, I don't know what I am doing next year. So I have this like really nice professorship at Scripps, which is 3 years non-renewable, and I'm in my final semester right now. So To be determined, but I don't know. I'm feeling hopeful. I'm sure I'll be doing something. And there's a chance I might be still in Claremont, not as faculty at Scripps.
Well, thank you so much, Jasmine, and thanks for all of you who joined us today. I hope you all had the chance to come out and see the Blood in the Fire, Sugar in the Milk in person here at AMOCA in Pomona. You can learn more about AMOCA and our current exhibitions at our website, amoca.org, and we'll drop that in the chat. Yes, and this recording will be available in a couple weeks on our website. So thank you so much.